Hello and welcome to another episode of Team English Talks. I'm Miss Owens and with me today I've got Miss Weston.
Hello.
Mr Steele.
Hello.
Mr Brough.
Hello.
And Ms Dales.
Hello.
So today we were going to be covering Macbeth because we can never have enough Macbeth.
It's just Macbeth with us, isn't it?
Macbeth, yes. Specifically though, today we're going to be looking at the supernatural. Okay, and it's something that's often overlooked a little bit in Macbeth. Because of the weightiness of the characters, I feel.
Yeah, it's almost like a tag on to Lady Macbeth, isn't it? But it's an element.
And we'll get into that later. They'll be starting making a link between Lady Macbeth
and
witches.
Does anybody remember the last time a supernatural came up on an exam paper for Macbeth?
Hasn't, has it? Unless was it
thought,
COVID? You think COVID?
It rings a bell.
It came up in a COVID year.
Do you think it was an autumn paper?
I think what we might be getting confused with is there was the ghost question in Christmas Carol, and last year that was supernatural happenings in a Christmas Carol. So,
but I feel like supernatural in Macbeth's not really.
No.
I can't remember.
I think we're overdue, but then again, we're overdue on ambition. We're overdue on a lot of things. So I think playing the whole prediction cards is always.
And it's always useful to think about the supernatural in relation to other characters. So even if the supernatural doesn't come up as a specific question, you can always always discuss it as a kind of driving force of the narrative.
Yeah, I just think that it's safe for us to cover as much as we can, and obviously you'll just need to listen to as many episodes of the podcast.
Well, there's plenty more podcast episodes to come on ambition and things like that.
As we said before, the witches, unrelentingly haggy. This podcast, unrelentingly
haggy.
This is the haggiest podcast on Spotify.
Yeah, and also to exemplify the fact that it is very useful listening to this podcast, Mr. Steele, you had a comment.
Yeah. Shout out to one of my Year 11 students who came in after her mock on Monday, the English Lit Paper 1 mock, and claimed that Team English Talks had saved her life because she didn't know any quotations for Mammoth's Wood or what to compare it to, but she'd listened to our war poetry episode from last year and it had helped her with a revision. And it makes us feel good that we've at least helped one student. If we only have one student listening, at least they are helped.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to say anything about the teaching. I'm
pretty sure Mr. Phillips covered Mammoth's Wood with that class last year, so that's it.
Miss Weston said that we are micro-influencers.
We are micro-influencers.
I don't know what that is, but I'm happy to take it.
It's where you have a kind of small base, but it goes deep. Like
a little bit like the witches.
Yeah.
Ooh,
so
micro-influencers.
Micro-influencers.
Don't put it on your exam.
Segue
into it, yeah.
Segue.
So obviously they begin the play.
Yeah.
We start with Act 1, Scene 1, don't we?
When shall we three meet again?
In thunder, lightning, or in rain.
So I think we have that. What the witches do is really set out their kind of chaos of Scotland. I always think of it like, people often think like, oh, well, why is Macbeth so readily kind of accepted as king? It was because Scotland is in chaos. You know, there's Norwegians invading, there's MacDonald is all off from the Western Isles trying to overtake
all the Kerns, all the Gallo glasses.
All the Gallo glasses. They're all trying, Thane of Cawdor, they're all, you know, vying for the throne. I think the witches coming in kind of exemplifies that time of chaos. And I think that is a theme throughout the play, that the supernatural is used to show this kind of the chaos of Scotland. So by that thunder, lightning, or in rain, the witches come at a time of chaos. They'll meet again at a time of chaos, and that kind of shows that Scotland is not a civil society that Macbeth has, you know, it's difficult to take over. It's easy for him to take over.
And it's like, yeah, you're right. Like that thunder, lightning, and rain is a metaphor for Scotland. But I've also thought that, like, because when you're in the middle of a thunderstorm, you've got thunder, lightning, and rain. And it's like they're giving it as an option, like thunder, lightning, or rain. It's almost like it doesn't matter what we meet in, it's still going to be the same chaos as what Scotland is in, and it's sets the scene really, really well.
So coming back to the witches anyway, we get this sort of sing-songy kind of otherworldliness, don't we? So, you know, however you're going to label it, but we get this idea that things are chaotic and they are certainly not going to get any better, are they?
Well, no, because the witches obviously then turn everything on its head, don't they? With their opening line of "fair is foul and foul is fair," and you know, the argument being that the entirety of the rest of the play is hinged on that one line. Is quite an interesting argument, I think.
Well, it's Macbeth's first line as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So foul and fair a day I have not seen. You've got that complete link with the witches straight away. That sort of I don't necessarily think it's he's already under the influence of the witches. I've always thought it as a susceptibility to the suggestive nature of the witches.
Yeah, perhaps Macbeth himself recognising the chaos, even though he's fighting for Duncan, he is still recognising that perhaps Duncan is not a good king, and that leads us to the fact that he so readily, like you said, listens to the witches and wants to take power because he understands this idea of the chaos in the country.
He says so foul and fair a day I've not seen before he meets the witches, doesn't it? And obviously this indicates that I suppose you could read it as he's under the control of the witches, or you could read it as he is somehow aligned with dark forces internally. Witches or not.
That influence is readily accepted by him, as you were saying, Miss Weston. I think just before we jump ahead, just sticking with that Act 1, Scene 1, I think sometimes students can get caught up on the whole, like, paddock calls, I come grey malkin and all that sort of stuff. It's just... It's witchiness.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
General
it literally is just witchiness.
They're talking about their familiars, aren't they?
Yeah. It's a bit like me calling Otto in for the night.
Yeah. Otto's Miss Owens' cat.
Actually, my familiar.
Saying that, considering how sparse Shakespeare is with his stage direction, Act 1, Scene 1 is one of the nicest places to analyse the stage direction, as opposed to analysing Paddock and Grey Malkin. To look at the thunder and the lightning. It's a nice opportunity, and you don't get that as often in Shakespeare, so it's worth paying attention to that as well.
Definitely.
Right, if we're moving on to Banquo and Macbeth's reaction to the witches, because that was a question from AQA, wasn't it?
It was last year's.
Not an Educast one.
Oh no, not last year's. The year before, the extract was their reaction to the witches.
They did have an essay question on that one, so it's worth thinking about. I don't think that would come up on an Educast. Well, I think it's too narrow. But we do get this idea of the two characters are very, very different in the way that they react to the witches being there. You've got Banquo, who I'll always maintain is quite rude about the witches.
The instruments of darkness.
Well, the beards forbid me to interpret.
Yeah, you should be women, but your beards forbid me to interpret the answer. Well, I'm sorry, maybe they just had a rough night.
Yeah. The dry lips.
They look not like the inhabitants of the earth.
Yeah, that's always
good. I mean, on a Friday morning, Monday morning, I look not like the inhabitants of the earth, but I'm definitely on it somewhere. He calls them out straight away, doesn't he? And then as soon as they get the prophecies, Banquo immediately sort of says, the instruments of darkness, they can tell us truths to win us to our harm. And Macbeth's having none of it. He's just like, stay, imperfect speakers, tell me more. And I was thinking it's going to go into a bit of a Grease moment there with the tell me more. We're going to have the backing singers and everything. If we ever did Macbeth the musical, that would definitely be something.
But I will say, whilst in the moment he does not take the witches seriously, later on he does say... when he's talking about as the weird women promise, thou playest most foully for us. So after the murder of Duncan, and he kind of suspects Macbeth, he does say, it should not stand in thy posterity, but that myself should be the root and father of many kings.
Yeah, he does ask them. He asks them for his own prophecy.
Yeah.
Perhaps though, there's the point you could make there is this idea of he does ask them for his prophecy. He is sceptical at first. He's not as willing to accept what they're saying.
He's just wary, isn't he? He's just
wary. But then when he's in that scene, he's seen that now what they said has come true for Macbeth. So, blooming neck, am I actually going to be the father of a line of kings?
I think the key thing with Banquo is that idea of actions. So he might believe the witches, or he might think that the witches have shown some truth, like to you they have shown some truth. He is not willing to act on what they have done, and I think that's what Shakespeare's trying to show.
Keep my bosom franchised,
clear,
allegiance clear,
so that kind of binary between, it's not so much the belief, it's the binary between the action, like are you willing to act on this prophecy, or are you willing to just kind of let it play out?
And it refutes Macbeth later blaming it all on the witches then, doesn't it? It's like, well, you did have other options, Macbeth.
But as well, like they literally, they tell him that all hail Macbeth that shall be king hereafter.
Yeah.
But then it's ambiguous, isn't it? There's a lot of ambiguity in that statement. And as we quite often try and drum into students, like Macbeth is the first one who mentions murder.
Yes.
Who goes down that murder route. The witches haven't said, you're going to be king and therefore you're going to have to murder Duncan.
Macbeth even says it himself, if fate will have me king, my fate, why fate might crown me.
Yeah.
So it's that idea that, you know, if this is fate, then he will get the crown without his stir.
Well, that's just classic Macbeth, isn't he? Just like he'll say one thing and then he'll literally do the opposite.
Yeah,
yeah, he's very easily persuaded, isn't he?
yeah, and I think that's a theme throughout Macbeth, that he is kind of sways one way. He sort of starts off a bit of a Hamlet character, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
Where he's like dithering and can't make a decision.
Oh, but do you know what? I'm so glad he doesn't stay as a Hamlet character.
No.
Because doing Hamlet with Year 9 at the moment, it's just like, oh, he's still thinking about it.
Still thinking about it. And
get there in the
here's
end.
another 3-page soliloquy where he's still thinking about it.
He'll get there at the very end.
And we do a very abridged Hamlet. We don't do the 4 hours of Hamlet weighing up whether he should murder Claudius.
Still thinking about about it.
Who's fought in Brough? Don't worry about that. Shut up.
Oh god.
He was
So, I
Guildenstein.
so influenced by them that he then immediately writes to his wife.
Yeah.
Drops her a quick text.
I feel like it might be worth us, while we're in the supernatural, before we jump ahead to the next witch scene, just please don't engage with any sort of theory that Lady Macbeth is the 4th
Oh,
witch.
I hate that theory. I hate it.
Like, no. However, in her opening soliloquy, I would posit the theory that she does invite darkness into her life. She invites the supernatural into her
Just
life.
as he did,
She calls us on the spirits to unsex her and fill her with the cruelty that's needed to be able to carry out the actions that she wants to carry out.
Yeah.
However, please don't be like, she's acting like a witch. Shakespeare perhaps thought that she was a 4th witch. It's like, no.
Because the whole
Please
point of
don't
Lady
write
Macbeth is that what Shakespeare's trying to show is that she cannot deal with these forces of evil.
Yeah, she can. She invites it into her life. And
she invites it
She
into her
does.
life. and
She wants to be shrouded in the dunnest smoke of hell. She's pretty unambiguous about it, isn't she?
Yeah.
You know, she says, "I literally want to invite evil forces into my life and be swallowed by them."
But I think Shakespeare's trying to show that that people who meddle with these dark forces, like she goes from, shroud me in the dunnest smoke of hell, to hell is murky. So that idea that by inviting these in, it's kind of caused her own downfall. A bit like, Macbeth, by listening to the witches, it's caused his own downfall. And I wish we could go into a bit more context about James I, but we won't.
It would be nice,
Because don't get marked on context, children. Teenagers, they don't like being called children,
They don't like
they?
being called children.
One of the things that I wanted to just sort of say is with Macbeth and this whole idea that he's sort of persuaded by the witches to the point where he implicitly believes what they say, and yet at the same time he tries to thwart Banquo's prophecies by getting rid of him and by getting rid of Fleance as well. So it's kind of like that. I want the prophecies for me to stick and come true, but I also want to be able to stop the other ones from coming true, the ones that I don't like.
Yeah.
So
he's really not reading the fine print,
no,
is he?
I think with him and Lady Macbeth, it made me think about that. There is a naivety, isn't there, with dealing with these witches. Let's invite them in. Let's just take the bits that we want, and then the other bits, we're just going to ignore them, or we're just going to tell them to go away. And I think they really don't know what they're dealing with, do they?
But I think there's something very kind of like, and you can see Shakespeare's influence of that kind of idea, that Greek idea of prophecy and wanting part of it but not the other part of it. And I think, Shakespeare would have been very aware of those kind of Greek myths where
if
prophecy,
you've seen Chaos,
exactly.
where he tries to thwart his own prophecy.
So again, we have that idea of him as a tragic hero. By trying to thwart parts of his prophecy, he actually brings about it happening.
While we're still on Act 1, Scene 3, what I like from later on in the play is we get an instance later in the play where Macbeth completely misremembers this scene in the "to be thus is nothing but to be safely thus" soliloquy. When he's going back over like what happened with Banquo, when he's putting the plans in place for Banquo, he said Banquo chid the sisters and bade them speak to him, as if to say, like, whilst they were in the middle of the prophecy, giving me the prophecies, Banquo stepped to was like, hang on, talk to me. I want my prophecies next.
What about me?
And that's why I'm going to have to kill him. And I'm like, come on, Macbeth. Like, we all know what happened. We were there. We saw it as well. It's I quite like that sort of.
But I think that kind of shows
later.
Macbeth's obsession.
Yeah.
That he's kind of going around in his head.
They were talking to me, and then he took it from me. And
all right, Colin.
He orders. I think he orders Banquo's execution before Banquo really makes it patently clear he's onto him. He orders Banquo's. I don't want to say prematurely, because I suppose there would have eventually been a sort of a point between Macbeth and Banquo where they couldn't ignore it any longer.
There was an elephant in the room.
An elephant in the room, a bit of an elephant in the room, yeah. But ultimately, he sort of, I don't know. It just feels he almost kills Banquo. Well, gets Banquo killed gratuitously. Yeah. It almost feels like he takes some kind of perverse pleasure in it.
Well, ultimately as well, like I would say, with that gratuitousness of it, like obviously you've got the thing of Banquo could still produce another heir, but ultimately, if Macbeth's taking the prophecy at face value, Banquo isn't being told that he's going to be king. It's not Banquo that's the threat to him, it's Banquo's sons.
But Banquo knows too much, doesn't he?
Yeah,
He's already said
that
I'm going to be, I'm going to make my allegiances clear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Macbeth's delusions and the influence of the supernatural, I think it's important in the middle of the play when the witches just sort of disappear for a while to go and do haggy things and have a much better time than the rest of the characters. Is that their influence in a sort of non-obvious way. So then obviously the next thing we get is the vision of the dagger.
Yeah.
And, is it hallucination or is it real? Because obviously later in the play, we, the audience, and Macbeth, see the ghost of Banquo. We don't see a dagger. Only Macbeth sees it. And obviously you were saying about how delusional he is and, this made me do it, they made me do it, Banquo made me do it, the witches, my wife made me do it. Yeah. There's also a dagger that points him. That marshalless me the way I was going, and such a one I was to use. Like in big neon signs, dagger, Duncan, this way.
Yeah.
Convenient much.
Yeah.
It totally wasn't me. It was the dagger that made me do it.
And obviously we never see that as an audience, and you have to wonder at that point, is it the witches creating something that only he can see? Is it his tortured mind that will be full of scorpions later?
But I think if this goes back to what Ms Weston said earlier, it's this idea that obviously, again, not getting into context, but in the Jacobean era, people did believe in the stars, the fates. They believed in witches. They believed in destiny. They believed in unseen forces. And the fact is, like Ms Weston said, this is a cautionary tale. These, the dark forces can have an influence over you, but you have the power to reject them, or you have the power to follow them. And I suppose it's not a simple binary of autonomy versus control.
Yeah,
it's not that simple.
Can we just have a look? Sorry, I'm just thinking now. When they've done the deed, Macbeth comes back, doesn't he? And he says, "I can't say amen. I cannot say amen. It sticks in my throat." Would you take that as something to do with the supernatural? That it's
because I've often seen it interpreted that he hears voices on the way down, like he hears the voices of someone saying "God bless us" and another one saying "Amen," and Macbeth then couldn't pronounce amen with it. Yeah. Like he's hearing those voices inside his head.
I thought it was
Donalbain and Malcolm in the next chamber. They wake up in the night and they say you have to say amen to go back to bed. You have to say prayers, and he is therefore out in the corridor or whatever. He's like, I should say amen too.
Yeah,
and he can't.
Killed the king, so.
And I just think about that line from his wife when she does want to.
No, because there's also one did cry murder.
Yeah, because they wake up. They wake up and from one of them having like a nightmare.
Right, okay. From a nightmare.
I suppose either way is.
But it's like, it just makes me think about that line where she says, like, stop up the access and passage to remorse. It's like, is there a physical blockage, like, in order for him to commit the act of regicide that's such an affront to nature?
Yeah.
Does it block him from...
I've got to say, I'm going to sound really dim here. And this is going to show that I've not taught Macbeth properly in years. But in my head, remembering that scene, it was... the guards that woke up and said amen while Macbeth was standing there with a dagger waiting for him to go back to sleep before he could kill them. Completely forgot it was Malcolm and Donalbain.
Yeah, one of them wakes up from a bad dream. Yeah, a very ironic bad dream.
As you were.
Just like in the night, obviously, we want to talk about the strange supernatural events in the night of Duncan's murder.
Yeah.
It's linked to that, isn't it?
Yeah.
He can't say amen to bless himself when they say amen.
Yeah. Well, I think that sort of, by doing the deed, he's kind of aligned himself, as we said before, with the supernatural, and therefore
create a blockage almost.
Yeah, he can't be blessed by God. He can't access Christian faith anymore because he's made his decision. Yeah. And therefore he just kind of goes with it. And
I read that as guilt more than anything. But it
severed his relationship with God now, hasn't it?
Like, and God is punishing him. Like, you're not going to get to say amen, mate.
Yeah.
Well, shall we think about so we talked about the murder, should we think about that aftermath, which is sort of an overlooked scene?
It is overlooked, yeah.
Because we have the two thing. We have the bit where Lennox is talking to Macbeth while Macduff is discovering the body. You know, where Macbeth says, "'Twas a rough night."
Always gets a laugh on the board.
And then we have the old man as well, talking to Ross about
the events.
So the Dark Knight strangles the travelling lamp, the horses eating each other. So all of those things, the idea of nature being disrupted. And you have some quite nice metaphors to do with like falconry. So the falcon is killed by a mousing owl. And obviously, you know, in Shakespeare's day, they had quite a hierarchy for what kind of birds of prey different nobility could use. So we had the idea of the falcon, which was the bird for the king, is being killed at by this kind of lesser bird. And I think you have those nice links to the metaphor. So as well as that kind of supernatural disruption of nature, you also have the idea that you know the lesser people are taking over Macbeth.
And it's chaos as well, isn't it?
Yeah, the horses eating each other, that's very chaotic.
I mean, I often just think, how do horses eat each other? But I don't really want to think about it too much, but it
Big
does.
teeth.
They have got big teeth, to be fair.
I know, but like, is it like, okay, you take a bite from me, I'm going to take a bite from you.
I imagine it's a bit more chaotic
like
than
a
that.
fight. Yeah.
I love how casual it is.
I think it's just been a bit of a drama queen.
Said they ate each other. Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I think they're just having a bit of a scrap, aren't they?
Yeah, okay.
And then they just move on, like as if that's just Friday night.
And then you have things with Lennox just after the murder. Before they know anyone murders, you know, the night was unruly.
The earth did
Chimneys,
chimneys blown down.
Yeah.
So I think that theme of like the supernatural and that link to chaos is kind of
and the great chain of being severed and nature being in uproar about it, and the way the witches control nature at the start with the weather and the pathetic fallacy, and the fact that the pathetic fallacy is there again is a really nice midpoint if you're tracking start, middle, end.
Just going to talk over this
let's
tannoy
just-
announcement so that you can't hear what the current announcement of the tannoy is. I'm still talking because we don't know what the tannoy announcement is. We don't know whether it is someone's car registration plate or something. But now it's finished, so we're going to carry on.
Somebody's stuck in the building.
That was very, very smooth, wasn't it?
Banquo's ghost has come back in the building. Shall we move on to...
Speaking of...
move on to Banquo's
Oh,
ghost.
hang on, just before we get to Banquo's Ghost, can we address the knocking?
Oh, go on then.
You do your knocking bit. Go on. You talk us through the knocking.
I feel like you don't want to hear about it, so no.
Yeah, we do. We're starting.
Do you not think the knocking bit is relevant?
Well, it's not something I've ever thought about.
No, I've
before,
never
so
thought
I'm not
about it
going to
before,
talk
no.
about it because you thought about
Well,
it.
I've just thought, there's Macduff at the gate.
I'm going to chip in
Go
then,
on.
as someone who has not taught Macbeth properly in years, with my absolutely valid feelings on this. So, listen up, kids. Right. So,
Teenagers.
there are several parts in the play where this motif of knocking is used. Obviously, we hear knocking during the murder, around the time of the murder. We then hear knocking when the porter is having his little moment just after the murder. There's a knocking at the gate. And then towards the end, as Lady Macbeth is walking in asleep, there's the knocking again. And I think that the knocking is possibly used as a bit of an auditory metaphor for Macbeth's fear of his fate. This idea that fate is coming for him, this idea that something dark is coming for him.
Like your time's up.
Like your time's up.
And also, just another thing.
What song?
The postcode lottery song.
Postcode lottery. Someone's knocking at your door. Someone will drag you to hell. Yeah.
In Act 4, Scene 1, when he goes back to the witch, I know we're skipping ahead, they say, something wicked this way comes, knocking, open locks whoever knocks.
Oh, now you're on board. Now you like my knocking metaphor.
You know what? If you don't want support, I'll stay quiet and I'll roll my eyes at you.
And we'll all look at our watches as well.
really pointedly.
That is a very good point. Yes.
I think it's like me and Miss Weston said. Like I don't ever teach that, but I think you raise a good point.
Yeah.
And moving on. Speaking of the porter, he plays an important part for context reasons that we won't go into. However, he mentions the word equivocation, and that's important as a link to the witches. So this whole idea of the telling of half-truths, there are massive contextual bits to that, like I said, we won't go into those. But the witches later on by Macbeth are also accused of being equivocators, and indeed they are equivocators. That they're masters of equivocation, right? Again, like you should read the small print Macbeth about those prophecies. But this is the point where the porter brings up equivocation just after the murder at that midpoint in the play. And the idea that if you deal with dishonesty, and again it's the idea of dealing with the devil, and we're analysing this from a linguistic standpoint, and the devil is in the details of the prophecies, isn't he? Yeah. And the devil is also in the language, and Jacobeans genuinely believe the devil could enter you through your mouth or your nose. And it's the idea that if you're dealing with people who are speaking the devil's language, aka lies, you're allowing them to access you. So those equivocations, he calls them juggling fiends, and the fiend that lies like truth. I begin to doubt the equivocation of the fiend who lies like truth. It's a worthy point to bring up that they are deemed as equivocators, which is a sin as well.
Yeah. Really hard not to link to context. Don't link to context, don't link to context.
Yeah. But you can talk about the half-truths, you can talk about the evil in their language.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we going to talk about Banquo's ghost?
Yeah, I think Banquo's ghost is an important supernatural. I think sometimes when thinking about the supernatural, some people just think about the witches, but obviously there are other supernatural events in the play, like Banquo's ghost.
Mm-hmm. I always wonder why he comes back as a ghost and then he kind of disappears again.
He never says anything.
And then he don't appear at the end and nobody's like, oh,
well, he pops up in the apparitions. He does pop up in the apparitions in Act 4 Scene 1.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah.
He smiles at him. The blood
bolts
of Banquo smiles at me.
Right, so he's still got his gory look.
At the head of the line of kings,
And again, that's another kind of, depending on the question you're asked, you can talk about it either as a supernatural event or as a sort of, students often ask, well, which one is it? Which one is it? Is it his guilt or is it supernatural? And the answer is it's both. And it depends. If you get asked a question about guilt, talk about it in the context of guilt.
Much like violence as well. Yeah. Like obviously they've just done their mock on violence, and there were quite a few of my students that have talked about Banquo's ghost and the blood representing the violence, but that idea of violence leading to guilt, because blood is also guilt. So you can change it to.
And to be fair, the fact is, if you look at ghosts in. This is a stretch, but you look at ghosts in other Shakespeare plays, and generally everybody can see the ghost. And on this occasion, I'm inclined to believe it is also a manifestation of Macbeth's guilt because he's the only person that sees it, and he goes crazy over it.
I mean, we can see it as well. I think that's the difference between the dagger, isn't it? And
yes.
And Banquo's ghost is like it is there, or are we made to take on Macbeth's ghost?
This is why I love the ambiguity of the hallucinations. Shakespeare's just constantly messing with us. It's like, is it the witches? Is it real? Is it Macbeth's mind? Is it all of those things? And that's what's so wonderful about it.
Because actually, I was going to say as well, like it's stated in the stage directions that the ghost of Banquo walks on. There is no stage direction that says anything about the dagger.
That's my point.
And quite often we don't see the dagger. There are productions though that do have the dagger on stage, and I've often thought that like perhaps, especially in Shakespearean times, the fact that we don't see the dagger on stage is probably a logistical thing. It says a bloke with a fishing rod over the top, there's a dagger.
Of course.
And I always go back to I know I'm jumping back here, but with the dagger scene, the Denzel Washington version where the dagger is present, and then it's revealed at the end of the scene that it was the door handle, the sunlight gleaming on the door handle, and Macbeth just led himself there. So it is up to interpretation, but like you said, Ms Dales, I like that ambiguity with it. I don't know what that was. That was some sort of
supernatural
noise.
occurrence.
That was Banquo's ghost.
There's knocking at the gate.
Coming back.
That was intense.
Well, there's plenty of room for him to sit down.
The table's full.
Has anyone seen an adaptation of Macbeth in which the ghost of Banquo is not present on stage?
I don't think so. There's the Gould kind of film version where
the Patrick Stewart one,
which switches between the two.
Yeah, you've got bits where he's literally shouting at the air, but then there's other bits where the ghost of Banquo's on stage.
I have seen productions where they always have the witches on stage in the background, so that idea of the kind of the constant influence of the witches.
And I think when we're talking about making points about this in your essays, you can talk about the ambiguity of it, that we don't know whether it literally is something that. Have the witches sent the ghost of Banquo to be there? Yeah. Is it Macbeth hallucinating it? Is it a manifestation of his guilt?
It's always nice to evaluate by saying perhaps Shakespeare intended...
Or perchance, if you want to
perchance,
that for some reason.
Perchance Shakespeare intended for his audience to wonder at this, perhaps it was this. Yeah, it's a lovely thing to be tentative with your ideas and to not be afraid of asking different questions like that.
So I think we've talked a bit about Act 4, Scene 1, but perhaps we should...
Yeah, just go through the apparitions then, really. And
A, B, C, D.
Go. Is that it? A, B, C, and D.
Armed head, bloody child, crown child, descendants. There you go.
What a zinger. That's great.
It's almost like learning to drive again when you're ABC, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's it. Right, that's the apparitions. Let's move on.
But the role, they take on a slightly different role there.
Yes,
they do, yeah.
And the fact that Macbeth has to talk to the apparitions themselves and not just the witches suggests that he's in for all of it now, isn't he?
He is in blood-stuck so far.
Yes, I might as well just carry on going.
Just carry on.
I'm going to hell anyway, so who cares?
And also, he doesn't want to hear it from the witches either. He says, would you like to hear
Call
it from
them,
our
let me see him,
our mouths are from our masters. And so it's almost like he's gone beyond the kind of
cutting out
witches.
the middleman.
He's cutting out the middleman, he's going straight to the top evil. So that idea that kind of, Macbeth has descended so far that he is beyond the kind of the witches.
And what I like with this scene is, obviously in Act 1, Scene 3, he's all, stare you imperfect speakers, tell me more. And in this scene, he's gone and he's like, now I'm here, I want to speak to your masters. And does he like what he sees? No, he does not. He absolutely hates it. And once again, we've got another announcement, so I'm just going to talk over the top of it. Although, no, it's just a bell, that's it. No.
But even the thing, I guess, that's a bit frustrating about the character of Macbeth is even after that scene, he says, infected be the air on which they ride.
He's always blaming them,
and damned those who listen to him. And you're like, you're listening to them.
Listen
You
to
literally just
them,
said,
mate.
damned are those who listen to them. And then he's the one, you recognise infected be the air on which they ride. You recognise that they are this kind of insidious force.
But the thing is, they reject him as well.
Yeah.
By the pricking of my thumb,
thumbs.
something wicked this way comes.
Yeah.
They see Macbeth as wicked and dark, and they reject him too. So it's kind of
Do you think they reject him?
Well, no,
I think
they don't reject him. What I mean is they sense evil in his in his approach.
But I see that more.
It takes one to know one.
Yeah, I see that's more of an affinity.
Affinity, yeah.
Rather than a rejection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like the fact that he sort of calls on them now. He's become almost as if
he's in charge.
Yeah, he's in charge.
I like the fact that he thinks he is.
Yeah, but it's that idea of he even says it afterwards. He says the first things of my heart should be the first things of my hand. He's not thinking things through. He's acting on impulse, and that is quite an impulsive thing to do. After seeing the ghost of Banquo, he returns back to the witches, even though he knows that they are this insidious force, even though he knows he's damned for trusting them, he's just acting on impulse. He's not thinking things through. And it's so that descend from Macbeth at the start of the play that spends, soliloquy after soliloquy deciding whether to kill Duncan. He's got that Hamlet vibe about him, to Macbeth at the end, who just is like, to the edge of the swords, his wife, his babes, set upon his castle, kill all Macduff's family.
Yeah, shoot first, think never.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think the witches think of Macbeth as just like that annoying neighbour who won't leave her alone?
Well, no, because
here he is again, leave me alone.
In the scene that we do tend to skip over with Hecate, she tells them off for interfering with him in the first place. They clearly have an interest.
I always skip over that one because it's always disputed as to whether Shakespeare
I was
going
to say, can we stop on that? Because I know it's not important for an exam necessarily, but for those of you who aren't aware, it's quite a common theory in academic circles that Act 4, Scene 1, Hecate's appearance, where Hecate berates the witches and gets cross with them, and the witches dance around. And a lot of people have theorised that actually Shakespeare didn't write this. This was inserted.
He wrote Act 4, Scene 1.
Yes.
Act 3, Scene
But
6.
Hecate's involvement, people say it's so... it's so at odds with the rest of the play, and for various different reasons I've forgotten. It doesn't seem to fit or make any sense.
It's Act 3, Scene 5.
If you don't know who Hecate is, by the way, Hecate's like the queen of the witches, is that right?
She's the Greek goddess of witchcraft.
There you go, Greek goddess of witchcraft.
I think it's useful to read this out, actually. It's in the copy of Macbeth that we study. At the start of Act 3, Scene 5, it says, It is unlikely that Shakespeare wrote this scene. The rhythm and style are quite different from those of the earlier scenes with the witches. Hecate's introduction in the play serves little purpose, and the scene is usually cut in modern productions.
Yeah, and Hecate just seems like a hammy addition. Do you know what I mean? It seems like a pantomime villain.
Yeah.
But can I just say my favourite bit is where Macbeth's having a little tantrum because he's not being told what he wants, and the witches are like, "Oh, why do you stand thus amazedly? Oh, we'll cheer you up and do a little dance."
Yeah.
That's all right.
I've never actually taken much care to notice of that.
They do a little dance and then
Come sisters, cheer we up his sprites, the witches dance.
I also think that goes back to what we've been said earlier about the idea that this is a production. It's meant to be entertaining. The witches are meant to be spooky and otherworldly and acting in this odd way,
really
and having
dances.
that, witches
I hope
dancing
they're doing
around.
Macarena.
In a modern production.
No, I would say more like a floaty sort of like Kate Bush style dancing, I would imagine.
In the 90s.
Yeah.
Remember that from when we do our production of Macbeth as the English department?
I mean, I'm just going to come on and do Kate Bush.
I think I might do Spice Girls as the witches. We might have Sporty Witch.
There's too many Spice Girls.
Scary Witch. We'll have 5 witches.
It sounds like it's going to be more like Hocus Pocus than Macbeth.
Oh yeah, I can get on board with that.
So what are we accepting as the final part of the supernatural then? Are we going to say Lady Macbeth? Are we
I mean, there's definitely supernatural.
the sleepwalking
elements to
scene in that
sleepwalking,
one?
So,
Yeah.
Well, there's bits beyond that when he, the juggling fiends.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about that already.
Important.
And
So-
then,
Fiend
the
like Queen.
I Live a Charmed Life.
Yeah, Fiend
Macduff
like-
from
Fiend
his
like
mother's
Queen.
womb.
Yeah.
Was untimely
So
wrecked.
let's go into Act 5, Scene 1 then.
Yeah, Act 5, Scene 1.
Go for it,
So
Mr. Steele.
it's always quite nice with Lady Macbeth because her first scene, Act 1, Scene 5, her last scene, Act 5, Scene 1.
Oh, palindromic.
Like,
I
yeah,
it.
nice. And I guess this is sort of the comeuppance for all of that
You
something evil
invited
spirits.
the darkness into your
Yeah.
life, and this
And
is
now
what
she
you
has
get.
a candle by her always.
Yeah, she can't bear that darkness anymore. It's one of those where we talk about the ambiguity again, that sense of, is this the manifestation of her guilt? Is this the punishment from God? Is this punishment from the witches?
Is it all of the above?
Is it all of the above?
Is it
indeed,
the evil spirits that she's invited into her
Is it
life?
the ghost of Banquo that's pushed her off the edge?
Yeah.
Oh God! Now, many mock papers to mark with,
No.
and at the end, when Lady Macbeth gets pushed off the tower by
Oh,
Banquo's ghost.
I thought you meant because the bit with the scene with Banquo's ghost is kind of the last scene that she tries to have influence over. It's the last scene
That's
that
the last
we
scene
see.
she's in, isn't it?
Yeah, so
Apart from this
I
one,
thought
yeah.
you were being.
Yeah,
It's
that's
very-
exactly what I meant.
Is there, just out of interest, is there any indication as to how she kills herself?
No, it just
No.
we only get the fiend-like queen who, as it appears, took off her life.
Yeah.
So we only
We
know
get-
she
we
committed
get-
suicide.
We
that's
get the
it.
scream from
Yeah.
off stage.
Yes, yeah.
So
Because some productions sort of hint at it, don't they?
Well, it's in the stage directions. That
Is
they
it?
hear
Cry
a-
of
right,
women.
okay.
Yeah, the cry of women. So they hear a
Of
scream
course,
off
yeah,
stage.
yeah.
So I would sort of surmise that
It
she.
involves a fall,
a
a jump,
fall,
doesn't
yeah,
it?
a fall.
Yeah.
And whether that was a genuine fall or whether she walked off, it's not
Yeah,
clear.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
we know that the castle is being abandoned. So maybe her servants were no longer watching her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, references to the supernatural there. I mean, there's so many things you can look at. There's the metaphor of, look, her eyes are open eye, but their senses shut. This idea that Lady Macbeth doesn't see, in inverted commas, clearly anymore. The hell is murky comment is a great one compared to the dunnest smoke of hell.
Yeah.
And I love that you said it's like 1551 because her language just keeps mirroring earlier. You've got the what's done cannot be undone. Shout out to my year 10s writing really well about that compared to the what's done is done earlier in the play. And it's so tragic
I
because
think-
she actually sees what she's done wrong, unlike Macbeth.
Yes, she does. And I think what the doctor says, I'm going to read the whole quote out here because I think this is very much linked to the theme of the supernatural. The doctor says, "This disease is beyond my practice, yet I have known those which have walked in their sleep who have died holily in their beds. In other words, I've seen sleepwalking before, this ain't it. There's something very dark at work here, and this is beyond anything I've ever seen."
Yeah, and he actually says, doesn't it, at the end of that scene, more needs she the divine than the physician.
Yes, exactly.
So he recognises the darkness that's going on at the time.
Unnatural acts breed unnatural troubles.
There we go. Lots of quotes
is it
to talk
infected
about
minds as well?
That's
Infected. No, infected be the air, but he says infected minds, I think.
I think
I think that's when he's talking to Macbeth in scene 5.
Infected minds will...
Unnatural
deeds do breed unnatural troubles. Infected minds to their death pillows will discharge their secrets.
So that idea of, this, like you were saying, it's not just sleepwalking, it's something more, perhaps because of those evil spirits that she invited.
And the proof of that supernatural is in her language, it's in how fragmented it is and how disjointed it is.
And when he talks to Macbeth in Act 5, Scene 3, the doctor, when Macbeth asks him how she is, he says, "She's not so sick, my lord, as she is troubled with thick-coming fancies that keep her from her rest."
Yeah. So maybe hallucinations like Macbeth's
thick-coming fancies rather than, an actual sickness within her. It's...
and then at the end of Act 5, Scene 1, the doctor says, God forgive us all. That's really quite dark, isn't it? Like it's like he's looked behind a very dark curtain and he's deeply affected by what he's seen.
My mind, she has mated and amazed my sight.
And I think what, as we sort of drag towards the end of Act 5, what then becomes apparent throughout the rest of Act 5 is Macbeth's waning belief within the supernatural, isn't it?
He clings on, doesn't he?
So it's like, at first it's like, I'll not be afraid of death and bane till Burnham Wood, till Dunsinane or something like that. It rhymes. Till Burnham Wood's Dunsinane. Then it comes, and then he's like, when he fights young Seward, and he's thou wast born of woman.
And
then finally, I bear a charmed life, and then Macduff says, despair thy charm. Macduff was from his mother's womb.
And even then, yet I will try the last. And the last is obviously the vaguest, beware Macduff.
But at first he says, I'll not fight with thee, doesn't he?
But I sort of see that as like sort of a sort of circular idea, that this idea of when all his reliance on the witches and the supernatural has been proven to be false, that actually he goes back to being this noble soldier at the ever. He's not going to yield, he's not going to bend the knee.
At least we'll die with harness on our back.
So that idea that we sort of see that if he hadn't, that underneath all of that, he's still that noble soldier. That idea of him having that fatal flaw of ambition, well, perhaps his also fatal flaw is how easily he's influenced by the supernatural.
And I think throughout Act 5, really, there's just a complete, in my view, a complete repudiation of the supernatural. The way the tree branches come up the hill, you'd never expect that prophecy to mean they will literally just be carried up the hill by soldiers.
And the whole not born of woman.
The woman born thing, it's like, he was born by what we now call caesarean section.
It's all very pragmatic.
It's all very literal, isn't it?
It all comes down to an argument over semantics.
So over semantics, it all boils down to...
Which is why we all love this play.
And in that regard, it is kind of a repudiation of the supernatural. Whether or not supernatural forces are at play, actually, human will and human determination overcome those forces.
Ultimately, because then if we go to the very, very last part of the play with Malcolm, it all comes down to them being a dead butcher and a fiend-like queen. So this all, I almost see that as like, obviously she's been compared to like a demon, but ultimately it's fiend-like. It's being blamed on the humans rather than the supernatural itself.
And unlike the start of the play, I think it's sad that we don't close the play with the witches. But I love your point. If Shakespeare wants to repudiate the supernatural, which he does, it closes with men. It closes with a king.
But I suppose because it's all come back full circle and we've got that restoration of calm and of peace. There's no place for the witches.
No.
They only appear in chaos.
It begins with valour and it ends with valour, doesn't it? That's essentially the point.
Witches are there, lots of chaos. By the end, everything's solved. Malcolm's on the throne. We've got a nice, lovely man king at the end.
Off we trot.
Oh, that was nice. Nice and conveniently wrapped up there.
Okie dokie then. Right, well, our next podcast, because we are coming up to Christmas.
Oh, you said the word.
I said the word, and it's November still, but it's soon with us. We are going to be talking about Christmas in the context of A Christmas Carol. What does Christmas mean to us? What does Christmas mean to Dickens? What does he want it to mean to people? And
I've sent out an invite, and we're going to have a very special guest on next podcast. We're going to be joined by the one and only Mr. Murphy.
Excellent.
Oh.
So if you're listening to this and you have
Mr.
any
Brough, that
questions...
sounded so underwhelmed.
Well, I just thought it'd be somebody slightly more exciting. But when you were saying it, I thought, we got an external visitor, like some renowned professor.
And Mr. Brough, who will probably be missing from the next podcast. Yes, if you do have any questions for Mr. Murphy on the historical, contextual side of Christmas or Christmas Carol or Victorian times, please do let your English teacher know and we will put those questions to him.
Or, as Mr. Murphy has told me ever since I invited him on the podcast, if you're in his year 11 class and they've kept asking him to come on the podcast, you can just ask him yourself.
Yeah, it's going to be a context fest.
We
Hold
love
on to your
context.
hats.
Because for Christmas Carol, we can use context.
Yes, we love context.
Right, thank you very much to everyone who's taken part and thank you to those people who are listening, all two of you.
Well, now that we're on Spotify, I can analyse the listenership. So,
Nice.
we're
When
climbing.
do we start getting revenue?
This is episode number 12, and you can monetize after episode 12. I'm not coming into work tomorrow.
Yeah, this department's going to be empty next week.
Right. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.